Today's scripture lesson is from the Gospel according to John, chapter 13, verses 31 through 35. When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. And if God has been glorified in him, God will also be glorified in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as it is said to the Jews, I now say to you, where I am going you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. You should also love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." I rolled into Yazoo City, Missouri on a Sunday morning. A little too late for church. We had too much traveling to do to get there. My friend Russell and I were on our Southern Blues tour, which we were following basically the river, the Mississippi River down, and the way that we travel is without any kind of real compass other than saying we want to go this direction. And so we had chosen to go 2-lane roads through Mississippi, and it ended up that day in Yazoo City. Yazoo City is just off the Mississippi River. It was once a large agricultural port along the river. However, now it is not. And when we rolled into town, the first thing that struck me was that there were a lot of demolished buildings that were sitting there kind of teetering half there. The streets were well paved though. And so luckily there was a cell phone signal, and so I looked up Yazoo City, which had had 2 tornadoes in the last 20 years and had pretty much decimated all of the downtown area. They didn't have enough money left over after FEMA left to really rebuild the downtown. And so the downtown was pretty much empty. There were a few churches still in the area, and we were going to get lunch in Yazoo City and realized quickly that no one lived in Yazoo City downtown area anymore. The town had moved 5 miles to the east where the interstate was, and the shell of it was there, but people still drove into the downtown area to go to church. And so we were going to stop in and see what was happening in church life there, but we were too late. They were letting themselves out. In the last 3 months, I have observed all kinds of different things and have noticed that the world has changed a lot just in the last 3 months. The Southern Baptist Convention had come out and said that they had held back names of sexually abusive pastors and were fessing up and coming clean with that. If you saw the news this week, they said they're cooperating with the FBI on this thing. Roe versus Wade, the ruling came down and people are pretty upset about that one. It's interesting to me that a religious issue on when life really begins has become such a constitutional thing. I was reading the outcome of that, what the court decided, and science was not a part of any of it. It was just a moral. People felt morally that it was either going to be on this side of the issue or the other side of the issue. And now we have a political battle coming up basically on how morals are interpreted in our United States and how that relates to federal law. The other thing I noticed is I began to read articles about church life. And since I was unplugged from church life, I thought it was a great time to read about the church since I wasn't in the middle of it all. Several things have come out of this since the great pandemic has happened. One is that people have left the church. You probably haven't ever noticed that people have left the church. The other thing is the denominations have become more and more irrelevant to the church in general. The Catholic Church is having a real seismic problem within itself. The Speaker of the House of Representatives was not given communion by her Archbishop in San Francisco, but the Pope did. And so you have that tearing right there. You have the Methodists and the Presbyterians still fighting over sexual orientation and should they be recognized with that. The disciples of Christ are kind of moving in different directions, and it's really hard to see what the future will hold for any denomination in the United States. And in fact, I would say that in my tenure as a denominational person, a pastor of a church, the denominations have become less and less relevant to congregational life as we live. Uniformly, pastors talk about how irrelevant it is to be a member of a Presbyterian denomination or a Methodist denomination or a disciple denomination. And I would say, yeah, that's pretty much the case. Some people think that denominationalism is ending. And it's primarily because the church is not a monolith anymore. Every community is its own unique setting. And so you just can't shuffle the deck and deal out the cards and think everybody's going to agree with what came down from on top and what the leadership of a denomination thinks is important. It's part of the whole fracturing of our own society, I'd say, that we've become more, as we've become more and more literate to the world around us, as we understand and see more of what's going on in the world, whether it's a war in Ukraine or what's happening within our own state or national government, we've become more and more particular about our local place. And so there are two things that are happening. One is there's a great disconnect from the local. People no longer involve themselves in anything local at all. They just kind of get their news from outside and do their outside world, and they live in their own little house in the community and know very little about what's going on in their community at all. And so that's the way they've chosen to go. And they have less and less, what's interesting, they have less and less interest in the world around them because they're more and more afraid about the world around them. And so we've kind of drawn up walls around ourselves, whether it's in an apartment building or a house or even on the street with homeless people. There's this idea, attitude, that the world's a dangerous place. And so we don't want to deal with that. And putting yourself out into the world, whether it's within a fraternal organization or a church or however you want to do it, has some people see as having a great inherent risk, because we don't know what those people are like. The stabbing of Salman Rushdie a couple of days ago kind of emphasizes that, a gathering of people to talk about literature, and a person jumps up on the stages and stabs a person. That would make me kind of reticent to go out in the world. People don't eat in restaurants like they once did. People don't greet each other as they once did. And there's this demarcation between who's in and who's out. And I'm not talking about people who are vaccinated or people who are not, or people who hold a specific political point of view to people who don't hold that specific political point of view. There's this idea that we all stand apart as individuals and are not giving ourselves over to anything beyond really our own little self-interest. We don't have this grand scheme that we all belong together. But I will tell you what I have discovered on my 3 months away in travel is that, one, people are kind. Don't believe what you see in media where people are at each other's throats or talking someone down or threatening. Those are a very, 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 one more, very small minority of the people who live around you. People are kind. People want the best for others. I was sitting in a Burger King restaurant in Yazoo City, and all the staff was there, and you could tell that they were working a job that didn't pay them a whole lot. But what was interesting was, as I sat and ate my burger there was a shift change at the restaurant. And as the shift changed, and one group went in and the other group went out, the group that went out talking about who needs a ride here and there, and oh yeah, I can give you a ride over there, and do you need groceries? Oh yeah, I can help you go do that. Connected. They were kind to one another. They were kind when they took my order, but they were really kind to one another. They gave themselves over in a deeper sense than I'm off, I'm done, my work shift's over, I'm going home. Kindness is a thing that's a part of our society that we don't show at all anymore, at least as far as media is concerned. The idea that we just got to fight tooth and nail to have our opinions understood doesn't take into account what kindness is. The other thing that I have noticed on my sabbatical is love is a hard commodity. It's not a commodity that is easily given and easily received, and that people are afraid of love in a lot of ways because love has a lot of disappointment with it. We trust people to do something. We give them that ability, we put it out there, and when they let us down, we're very reticent, again, to offer it and to give ourselves over to something that is loving and deep and kind. Because when we love somebody, we open ourselves up to all of that can come back. And when we get scarred, when we get cut, when something happens and we offer ourselves over to either an individual or a group or even an idea that represents us giving ourselves over, and that doesn't happen, and it doesn't come back to us in ways that we expect, there are several things that happen. We become embittered, or we just become reticent, or we just don't try again to be a part of that group or anything else. I've become convinced in reading the Bible and looking at Jesus over the last 3 decades of ministry that Jesus, in a lot of ways, was bucking the trend of his time and continues to buck the trends of our time, to offer ourselves to something deeper and greater and more loving than we really have ever had or have achieved. It's kind of this casting out of a net of sorts and pulling in slowly where people are going. And like a lot of fish in a net, if you've ever used a net, a lot of fish get out of the net. It's not like they're all trapped in there and they make a great catch. But Jesus is kind of the gentle fisherman where this yearning to be a part is offered again and again and again. I don't read in any of the gospel stories, John or all, where Jesus sets a mark in the sand, draws the line and says, you're in, you're out, you're one of my disciples, you're not one of my disciples. Even the one who betrayed him, he offered love and a chance to resolve himself and to have something different happen. We as a congregation continue to struggle with attendance. It's not the same as it used to be. It's a different world we live in. Half of our congregation's here on a Sunday. The other half's in the space of cyber. Will they come back? No, they may want to. They may not. That's okay. That's just the way the life is these days. How will we connect with one another? How will we show that we care for one another in this new reality that we live in? How will we give ourselves over to ideas and aspects of living and faith that are deep and rewarding and will give us a sense of belonging, a sense of being buoyed up, a sense that we are really doing God's will and work in this place? That is a question that is really still up in the air in the world that we live in today. How will we attract new people to be a part of us and join us? All of those things will be answered in a future that seems very uncertain to me. I've gotten to the age in my life where it's easier to look back on the halcyon days of my youth and think, oh, the world was so much better then. You know, there's a way that when you just kind of go over a bridge at some point in life where things seem better in the past than they do in the future. And then you have to resist that, I have found. When I think of the past and I think of the people that I grew up, there were certain aspects of life there that as a child seemed really good. People cared about me. They looked out for me, and so there's things. But as an adult, I have to really take off my child eyes and say, you know, for some people it really wasn't so great back then. Native Americans, where I grew up, were not treated well. They're being treated a little bit better than they were then. At least that we recognize that they have issues and things that need to happen. But I'd still say we have a long way to go. I still say we have a long way to go within our society about the treatment of other people of color, of women, of people who are differently oriented, of people, of children. We have a lot of things we can do together as a congregation to make the world a better place. And I think the hallmark of that is this little thing that Jesus says at the end, that we'll be known as Christ's disciples by the way we love one another. Love starts in this house. This is the way that we show one another that we care deeply for each other. And that house is a house that has many doors and windows where people can come in through all kinds of different ways. But if we can't love one another while we are here, we have very little to offer to the world. And so, as Jesus says, that's how they'll know we are his disciples. It's a big challenge, I think, even today, to love in a world that seems to be parsing itself up and tearing itself apart and drawing lines in the sand, to love one another. Let us attempt it at least. And if we go down trying, we're still trying. Amen.